I want you to picture something for me. You're lying on a gurney in a hallway because the ER is full, and there's a fluorescent light right above your head that won't stop flickering. And somewhere behind a curtain, a machine is beeping in a rhythm that doesn't match your own heartbeat anymore. You can feel your own pulse in your teeth. There's a weight sitting on your chest, like somebody parked a truck on it, and you can't get a full breath, no matter how hard you try. And a young woman in blue scrubs leans over you, and her voice is the only calm thing in the entire building. And she says, "Sir, look at me. Stay with me. You are not going to die tonight." I believed her. I don't know why. I was a stranger in her country, flat on my back, 62 years old, sweating through a shirt that wasn't even mine anymore, because somebody had cut it off me, and I believed a woman I had known for 4 minutes more than I believed my own cardiologist back in Sacramento, who I'd seen twice a year for a decade, and who'd never once looked me in the eye that long. Her name was Marife. 4 years later, she's my wife. I'm Walter. I'm 66 now. And I want to tell you how a heart attack in a hospital hallway in Iloilo turned into the best 4 years of my life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up and tell you who I was before any of this happened, because it matters. I spent 36 years as a machinist for an aerospace supplier outside Sacramento, a place that made fittings and housings for aircraft hydraulics, tolerances so tight you'd lose the job over a hair's width. I was good at it the same way a man gets good at anything he does 5 days a week for 36 years, which is to say, I stopped thinking about it and just did it. Good union job, steady hands, bad knees from standing on concrete floors that long, and blood pressure that crept up every year like it was keeping its own calendar. My wife's name was Carol. We were married 31 years. We raised 2 kids in a split-level house in Citrus Heights, a decent neighborhood, sprinklers running at 6 a.m., the kind of place where everybody knew everybody's dog by name and nobody knew much else. Carol taught 2nd grade for most of those years. She had a laugh that carried through walls. 4 years before any of this, she went to bed on a Tuesday night, same as any other night, and didn't wake up. Heart, they said. No warning, no last conversation, just gone. And me finding her the next morning, with the coffee already dripping in the next room. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that part, because if you've lost somebody you already know what it does to a house, and if you haven't, I don't think I can explain it in a way that would mean anything to you. I'll just say, the house got very quiet, and I got very good at filling silence with small, pointless tasks. I fixed a fence that wasn't broken. I repainted a shed nobody used. I ate a lot of sandwiches standing up at the kitchen counter, because sitting down at that table by myself felt like admitting something. My daughter Renee lives up in Portland. She called every Sunday, same time, like clockwork, and I appreciated it more than I ever told her. My son Dave's out in Reno, and Dave shows love the way a lot of men his generation do, which is a text about the 49ers, and nothing underneath it, and I understood that, because I'm the one who taught him to do it. About 2 years after Carol passed, my old army buddy Frank started calling me from the Philippines, where he'd retired to Cebu about 6 years earlier. Frank had been telling me for years to come see it before I got too old to enjoy anything, and I'd always found a reason not to. Then one November, sitting in that too-quiet house with nothing on the calendar until spring, I didn't have a reason not to anymore, so I booked a flight. I liked it more than I expected to, that first trip. The heat hit you the second you walked out of the airport. Thick, almost wet. The traffic was its own kind of theater. Jeepneys and motorbikes and tricycles, all moving like a school of fish that somehow never collided. And people talked to you. The guy at the convenience store asked where I was from and told me his cousin drove a truck in Fresno. The woman selling mangoes at the market called me Sir Walter by my second visit to her stall, which nobody in Citrus Heights had bothered to do in 15 years of buying my groceries at the same store. I went back the next year for a longer stretch, 6 weeks instead of 3. And the year after that, I decided to do it properly. I rented a small apartment in Iloilo instead of bouncing between hotels, because Frank had a friend there and told me the city was calmer than Cebu and cheaper besides. 3 months, I told Renee. Just an old man on an extended vacation. I was 2 months into that stretch, sitting in a little outdoor cafe near the Esplanade one evening with a plate of chicken in azel in front of me and a San Miguel sweating on the table, when the whole left side of my chest turned into something with teeth. I don't remember a lot of what happened next, clearly. And what I do remember comes in pieces, out of order, like photographs somebody dropped on the floor. I remember the cafe owner shouting something in Ilonggo I didn't understand and didn't need to. I remember being half carried, half dragged onto the back of a tricycle, of all things, because in that traffic it was faster than waiting for an ambulance to fight its way over, and the driver ran 2 red lights getting me there. And I have never in my life been so grateful for a man breaking the law. I remember the automatic doors of the ER. I remember that flickering fluorescent light in the hallway, because the ER itself was full that night. Some kind of bus accident on the highway had brought in a wave of people ahead of me. And I remember Marife. She wasn't even supposed to be my nurse yet. She told me much later that she was walking past with a chart in her hand, saw the monitor they'd hooked me to in the hallway, and just stepped in, because the assigned nurse was tied up with someone worse off than me, and nobody else was free. She got the on-call cardiologist paged herself. She got a line into my arm before I even understood what was happening to my own body. And the entire time, she talked to me. Not medical talk, not the clipped professional voice you'd expect. My name. Where was I from? Did I have children, and how many? And what were their names? Just enough ordinary conversation to keep a man's mind above the water, while his heart tried its best to quit on him in a hallway in a country he was only visiting. It was a heart attack, a real one. Blockage in the left anterior descending artery, the one the cardiologist later called the Widowmaker, and he said it plainly, not unkindly, the way you'd want a man to say it to you. They got me into the cath lab within the hour and put in 2 stents. I was awake for part of it, which I hadn't expected, watching a screen I didn't understand while a doctor talked me through what he was doing in a voice as calm as Marife's had been. I spent 4 days in a private room after. The whole thing, the ER, the cardiologist, the cath lab, the stents, 4 days with a nurse checking on me around the clock, came to a little under 400,000 pesos, about $7,000. Frank looked up what the same stay would have cost back home, just out of curiosity, and after about 30 seconds of scrolling, he just shook his head and wouldn't tell me the number. I found out on my own a few months later, comparing notes with my old cardiologist in Sacramento. It wasn't close. It wasn't in the same country of numbers. Marife checked on me every shift for those 4 days, and by the second day she wasn't really checking my chart anymore, so much as she was checking on me. She brought me a newspaper because I mentioned missing one. She argued with me about the Warriors, and it turned out she knew more about them than I did, which embarrassed me in a way I hadn't expected to enjoy. On the 3rd day, sitting in the chair by my bed on her break, she told me she'd almost gone to nursing school in Manila, but stayed in Iloilo instead, because her mother was raising Marife's 2 younger brothers alone after her father left, and somebody needed to help with the bills close to home. She was 31, divorced once, no children, and guarded about the divorce in a particular way that told me, without her having to say it, that it hadn't been kind to her. I flew home 3 weeks later, with a stent in my chest, a folder of discharge paperwork, and her number in my phone. I told myself that was the end of it. A strange, lucky thing that happened to an old man in a hospital bed on the other side of the world. A story I'd tell at Thanksgiving for a few years, and then forget the details of. It wasn't the end of it. We started talking most days. And I want to be honest about what those conversations actually were. Because it's not what people assume. It wasn't romantic in the beginning, not really. It was her telling me about a difficult patient who wouldn't take his medication. It was me telling her about a kitchen faucet I'd fixed badly, twice, and finally had to call someone for. She'd send a picture of her nephews playing in the yard. I'd send a picture of my garden, which by then, for the first time in 2 years, I'd actually started tending again, because I found I wanted to have something to show her. Somewhere around the 3rd month, the conversations changed. Slowly, not all at once. She started signing off differently. I started waking up checking my phone before I'd even had coffee, which is not a thing a 62-year-old widower expects to be doing again in his life. I told Renee about her that fall, over the phone, and there was a pause on the line, exactly the pause you'd expect. "Dad, she's your nurse?" I told her she had been, and now she was something else. "How old is she?" 31, I said. A longer pause this time. "Okay," Renee said, in the voice kids use when they've decided not to fight about something yet, but haven't decided not to worry about it. Dave was more direct, because Dave has always been more direct. He called me on a Saturday and asked me straight out if I understood what this looked like from the outside. An old man, a heart attack, a young nurse who happened to be there. I told him I understood exactly what it looked like. I told him I wasn't asking his permission. I was telling him what was happening in my life. And there's a difference between those two things. And it took him a minute on the phone to accept that, breathing hard like he was deciding whether to keep arguing. And then he just said, "All right. Just be careful, Dad." And that was as close to a blessing as Dave gives anybody about anything. I went back to the Philippines that January, and this time I didn't book a return flight. I stayed 5 months. I met her mother, Nena, in a small concrete house in a barangay outside Iloilo City. Chickens working the yard, laundry on a line, her 2 younger brothers still in school. One of them, JJ, 16 and sharp as a tack, wanting to be an engineer and asking me more detailed questions about American universities than I had good answers for. Nena fed me until I genuinely could not move, then apologized for not having more to offer, in a house that had already given me more than I knew how to thank her for. I want to tell you about one afternoon in particular, because it's the one I think about most. Nena and I were sitting on plastic chairs in that yard while Marife was still at the clinic, and Nena, through a mix of English and Marife translating later, told me she'd worried at first. The same worry my own kids had. An old foreigner, a young daughter, a hospital bed. She'd heard that story before, and it didn't usually end well for the daughter. But she said she'd watched me for 2 months by then. She said, "You ask her about her day before you tell her about yours. That is how I know." That's the whole thing, if you want it in one sentence. That's the difference between the version of this story people assume and the one that actually happened. Marife and I got married that April. A small ceremony at a church in Molo. The one with the coral stone facade the whole town is quietly proud of. Frank stood up for me, looking almost as nervous as I was. Renee flew out, the first time she'd ever set foot in the Philippines, and she cried through most of the ceremony, which she blamed on the heat and which nobody believed for a second. Dave didn't make that one. "Work," he said, and I believed him, mostly. But he sent a card, and for Dave, a card is a speech. Here's the thing I want to say plainly, because I know exactly what people assume when they hear 62-year-old American, 31-year-old nurse. And I don't blame anybody for assuming it. I'd have assumed it too, before any of this happened to me. Marife kept working after we married. Still works now, matter of fact, at a small clinic near where we live. I never bought a house and put it in her name alone. I never funded a family business or a corporation with an uncle running it. When her brother JJ needed help with tuition, Marife and I sat at our kitchen table with a calculator and talked it through together, the same way Carol and I used to sit at our table and work out what we could and couldn't afford. That's the difference, if you're looking for it. Not the age gap, the decision-making. 2 names on every account, 2 voices in every decision. We settled in Iloilo, not Sacramento, and there were reasons stacked on reasons for that. Her whole family is there, and my kids can fly out to see us about as easily as they'd fly to see me in California, maybe with one more layover. My cardiologist, the same one who put those stents in, is 15 minutes from our door, and a full checkup with an EKG runs me a fraction of what a single specialist visit cost back home. Even with Medicare. I take a low-dose blood thinner every morning with my coffee. I walk 4 kilometers most mornings, along the esplanade by the river, past the same vendors, most of whom know my name now, the way that Mango Seller in Cebu once did. Renee's visited 3 times since the wedding. Dave finally came out last year, stood in Naina's kitchen eating pancit off a paper plate. A little stiff at first, the way Dave gets in unfamiliar rooms. And by the end of the week, he was helping JJ with algebra homework at that same plastic table. On the flight home, he told me he'd pictured something entirely different than what he found, and he didn't need to spell out what he meant by that. I already knew. I had a heart attack in a country I was only visiting, in a body that was 62 years old and had, by any reasonable measure, earned the right to quit on me right there in that hallway. And instead of an ending, I got handed the second half of my life by a woman in blue scrubs who wasn't even supposed to be there that night, who stepped in because nobody else was free, and who has been stepping in, one way or another, ever since. I'm not going to tell you it's simple, marrying someone half your age in a country that isn't the one you were born in. There are people who will look sideways at you for the rest of your life over it. I've had it happen, at family gatherings back home, in the tone of a stranger's question at a barbecue, and there's not much you can do about that, except live well enough, and honestly enough, that it eventually stops mattering to you. But I'll tell you this, my heart is stronger now, by every measure my cardiologist tracks, than it was the day it nearly killed me. And so is the rest of it. If you're sitting with something similar right now, something in your own life that doesn't fit the picture other people expect of a man your age, there's a book I came across afterward called Second Wind. Written by a cardiologist who split his career between the States and Southeast Asia. It walks through cross-cultural marriage, retirement visas, and the medical realities of aging overseas. All the practical questions nobody wants to ask out loud. I don't get anything for mentioning it. I just wish somebody had put it in my hands before all this, instead of me finding it 2 years after. There's a link in the description if you want it. If this one meant something to you, go ahead and hit like, and subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories like mine. Thanks for sitting with me a while.